Doctor, lawyer, engineer, or my Marwadi family's personal favorite, businessman. These were probably the career choices I could have made when I had to do so. But me being the rebellious self, I chose to be a musician. My earliest reference and inspiration of music comes from my grandmom, who used to listen to songs and watch movies of almost every language before subtitles were even a thing. She understood emotions and characters way more than she understood language. That's probably why she connected with every human being she met through her lifetime. A decade or so later, when I made this choice of becoming a musician, this realization was probably the reason why. Because my introverted head found that music was probably the best way for me to connect with another person's emotions or thoughts. In my opinion, everybody's life has a soundtrack, and to be able to connect with them and be part of that soundtrack is something one has to go through to understand what it is. So around 2015, I started my career as a professional musician, and even though there were initial struggles like there is in every field you choose, especially when you choose something as unconventional as beatboxing, which happens to be a form of hip hop, and in a city like Chennai where new music is appreciated when it's very good. And I was very thankful to be starting off as an independent musician in Chennai, because I've said this I don't know how many times, but I'm going to say it again, that I don't think I would have made halfway where I am today if I was born in any other city or lived in any other city other than Chennai. So almost 8 years of being a professional musician at around 2019, before all this, like back when masks were an accessory, not a necessity, and social distancing was probably a joke. So I'm going to tell you a story which changed the way I look at myself and my music. At around this point in 2019, when I was performing for a gig for about 750 people, it was so loud. It was so loud that the neighbors had to call the cops to tone it down. So after the gig, a few of the audience members had come in to interact with us, and one of them said, and I quote because I vividly remember the conversation. She said, "I have been going through one of the darkest phases of my life in the last month and a half. Frequent panic attacks. I'm not able to sleep through for a couple of hours at a stretch. But when you performed, for the first time in a month and a half, I experienced silence." She wept. I wept. And that, my friends, is how my association with music, my realization with music, my communication through music changed. That's when I realized that music belongs to the world of well-being and healthcare as much as it does to the world of entertainment. This led me through a new phase in this journey, which I like to call the beautification of music for some reason. I think it's good to hear for me. Might be cringy for other people, I don't know. So this phase is where I got certified as a clinical music therapist from Chennai School of Music Therapy, which happens to be one of the only legit places to learn music therapy in the country. So when I said music therapist, I could almost hear the murmurs of everyone who was watching it, because when someone says musician or therapist, everybody is clear on what they do. But when I put those two words together, the classic Indian expression of comes in, right? So it's sometimes people think that music therapist is someone who plays music for patient in the hospital, a performer rather. It's actually I'm more like a physical therapist or a physiotherapist. They use treadmills, walking rods, and dumbbells. I use music. You know what? Let's put this to rest once for all. The difference between a musician and a music therapist is a simple change in focus. For a musician, it is what they can derive out of the experience of music. For a music therapist, it's what they can encourage another person to derive out of the experience of music. A simple change in focus. And sometimes it comes off as music therapy is probably a new age science or a Gen Z gimmick that has gone into the healthcare sector or healthcare industry. In fact, it goes back, way back into Greek mythology, where Aristotle and Plato used to prescribe music as an additional form of well-being to their patients having symptoms of depression or anxiety or fearfulness, even emotional regulation or so on. And it was so evident in Greek mythology that god Apollo was assigned to reign over both healing and music, because according to them it was so closely connected. In India as well, way back when kings used to reign over kingdoms, of course, they used to have darbars where singers like Tansen and so on used to come in and sing for the kings and the people, because apparently it had transcendental powers. Music therapy is in fact a very scientific, evidence-based and a holistic approach to healthcare. When I say holistic, it shows how our modern medicine has developed from preventing disease to improving lifestyle of their patients. So when a music therapy session is on, or whenever the brain is in contact with music, the medial prefrontal cortex lights up. Of course, the other parts do too. I'm mentioning this one particularly because this triggers memory. Suddenly you see a person, a place, a memory from the past. This is probably why Alzheimer patients can remember songs from their youth, or stroke patient access lyrics faster than they can access language. So us as music therapists cater to regulation of parameters such as blood pressure, pulse, breath regulation, to complicated, slightly more complicated stuff like neuro rehab or palliative care or hypertension and learning disabilities and so on. So here in this next couple of minutes, I'm going to try and tell you, with my limited experience of music therapy, I have worked in departments such as neurosurgery, psychiatry and oncology. These have been my major area of work so far. So the first case that I would like to talk to you about is this patient who was a trauma patient. He had been attacked with a stick and had to go through a surgery called bifrontal craniectomy, which is basically removing this part of the skull, because like if we get hurt on the arm or the legs, the skin here is stretchable, so it can naturally swell out and swell in, which is not the case with the brain because the skull is in the way. So after the surgery, we realized that his ability to process emotions had almost dwindled down to zero. And we also noticed that his movement on the left side of his body was not as efficient as on his right side. So after working with him for a month and a half, we were able to get him to smile again, sing his favorite bhajan, and his movement in the left side was far better when we started 45 days back. This is supported by this theory called the opera hypothesis and the SEP hypothesis, which basically means, okay, let's do this. The neural connections in the brain are so intertwined and so dense. Let's imagine the electricity pole of our local electricity board. If you have to find a one particular wire, good luck. So imagine the brain's networks like that, and a lot of networks, like for example, the BG thalamocortical circuit all controls speech and movement. So when we work on one aspect, the other aspect that's lacking also comes up eventually. One of the most fascinating cases that I saw in psychiatry was this case relating to psychosomatic pain. Now, psychosomatic disorder is a mind-body disorder. Psycho meaning the brain, soma meaning the body. So, in my opinion, in my very humble opinion, it's easier to get diagnosed for something that's wrong on the surface. I mean, physically. So when there's stuff that's bottled up inside you because of stress or emotional turmoil, it becomes difficult to diagnose, and it also is difficult to manage that. So your body and mind finds a way to release the stress or whatever that's bottled up. For some people, it develops into acne. For some people, it develops into rashes in their hands or legs or body. Or for other people, it comes out as pain on the lower back, shoulders, and so on. So with this person, or cases like this in general, music therapy sessions are a mode of release. To confide into someone who's essentially a stranger in the beginning, to confide into the stresses of their lives, and to find a release that can bring down the pain scale even physically. In the Department of Oncology, for example, we had this fascinating case where the patient was declared terminally ill, which means death was a certainty sooner than later. Even in this situation where he received the diagnosis, he had taken it in his stride and just went on with it. After his first music therapy session though, he wept like a baby. Upon asking why, he said this act of kindness and unconditional love that he experienced during the session just made him very overwhelmed. The point that I'm trying to drive home is a simple act of kindness can go a long way. During tough times like the COVID-19 pandemic, I had conducted this survey. About 154 people participated, and the results were astounding for me. 88% of the population agreed that music is probably the best mood regulator for them. And a staggering 77.6% of the participants declared that there was an increased time in music listening during their quarantine period. So it goes on to say that our general expression of, I had a bad day, I probably am going to go listen to this particular form of music. So this journey of being a musician and then a music therapist has taught me quite a few things, introduced me to sounds that I probably wouldn't have otherwise, met people that I probably would not have met otherwise than like being a musician or a music therapist. It's given me experiences, memories, people, knowledge, skills, and the list keeps going on. When I reflect upon this journey, what comes to the forefront is that I'm very proud of myself in the very humble sense that I chose happiness over conventionality. Like I could have taken a job or done any business and been successful for about 10-15 years. What stopped me was the fear of not being happy in the long run. The thrill and the excitement of taking the road less taken has brought me this far in front of you. In this journey of a few years, what has driven the whole process, I can point my finger to one thing without thinking twice. And I've said this a million times on stage to my patients or clients and my friends and family, of course. I'm going to say that again. I don't know what your question is. Love either has the answer or is the answer. On that note, ladies and gentlemen, this is Ankush Jain. Thank you for your time.